All right. Morning, everybody. Can you hear me in the back okay? That's a lot of thumbs up. Great. Good deal. Well, welcome to Discover 2021. All of you in the crowd that wish that this was a virtual event and you were in front of your home computer, raise your hand. Wow. I don't see anybody. Okay, cool. I guess we made the right decision to have a real event. No more of that virtual stuff. I mean, it has a place. It helps, but this is better. Anyway, this year's Discover event, we're really excited and honored to have the opportunity to bring in industry-related thought leaders. These are folks that will share their insights into manufacturing topics such as when and how to introduce automation into your shop, digital manufacturing solutions to enhance productivity. Yesterday, we had a fantastic Job Shop, Profit Shop panel of experts share some of their experiences and ideas for success. And I'm really excited about today's speaker, who's going to cover the topic of economic and supply chain trends, market industries as we head into 2022. That's probably the one question I've been asked the most this week is, what do you envision for 2022? What's the crystal ball look like? And I've told them all, give me until noon today, and then I'll answer. So looking forward to this. So I'm honored to be able to introduce this morning's keynote speaker, Mr. Doug Woods. He's president of the Association for Manufacturing Technology. Doug also sits on a number of industry boards, including the Reshoring Initiative, the MT Connect Institute, and the National Center for Defense Manufacturing and Machining. Doug joined AMT as its president in 2009. In his time at AMT, Doug has led the effort to develop MT Connect, which is the industry-wide interoperability standard that has grown into usage across a wide scope of manufacturing operations around the world. And it's throughout our production operation as well as the technology center here today. Additionally, he's overseen the development of MT Insight, a customized manufacturing business intelligence platform, as well as the expansion of AMT's global technology centers throughout the world. This morning, Doug's going to share his thoughts and insights into emerging technologies and markets, as well as economic, manufacturing, and supply chain trends headed into 2022. Just at the conclusion of his presentation, we are going to save some time for Q&A. So as he's working his way through, as questions come to mind, jot them down, and we'll have time to address it at the end. So without further ado, please help me welcome Mr. Doug Woods.
Working. Okay, it's working. All right, guys, glad to be here. I'm a little bit handicapped with what, normally I don't have things in my hands. I'm actually not Italian, but all my friends are Italian, so I pretty much grew up using my hands to talk, and so if I kind of go in and out of the mic like that's just happening right now, it's my Italian non-heritage that's actually causing it. So really glad to be here. Dan's kind of set me up last night. He was talking to me about how well my buddy Mike Chico did earlier in the week and the great panel he had yesterday. He was kind of like, don't blow it on Wednesday. So it's kind of, all right, it's nothing really too hard to work with. But listen, I love talking to folks about manufacturing. It's what I've done my entire life. So what I'm going to do today is just take you on a little cruise through a bunch of stuff I see, I run into, some things I know something about. I talk fast, so it's trying to get you on to the next thing. I know the fun stuff is all happening out there on the floor, so I'll try to walk you through it real quick. And at the end, if I miss something you thought was really important you want to come back to, as Dan said, just feel free to grab me and ask me. I'll see what I can do. I always start out with this slide because it's kind of important to me. It kind of sets my roots in the industry. So this picture is a bunch of people that started a tool and die company in Rochester, New York back in 1947. Guy in the top left-hand corner, that's my grandfather. A bunch of immigrants thought they had a better idea to actually make a tool shop. And so these guys started Alliance Tool and Die back in 1947, which grew into the largest contract manufacturing shop in the United States by the mid-70s. They had 1,200 employees. They're doing about $100 million in business. And it really happened because they spent most of their time focused on how to out-innovate their competitors. They didn't create another Me Too shop. They really focused on what they could do that was unique and different to solve problems in the manufacturing space. So there was a mold making division, a metal stamping division, an automation division, a contract machining division, leak tests and metrology division, 11 divisions altogether. So my background, when you're wondering, hey, what's this knucklehead that runs an association coming to talk to me about manufacturing? Truth of the matter is, and don't tell people on my board of directors, of which there's some in the room, I don't know much about running an association. I know a lot about manufacturing. So that's the guy that's talking to you today. And I've always loved the technology part of being in this business. And so this is a little bit of timeline. I actually started full-time somewhere back there in the 80s, getting into this space of manufacturing technology. And I happen to have added into my degrees, which I really just kind of have one and a half, little bit of statistics. And so back in the early 80s, those of you who remember that, that was the Dran-Deming period. So because I had a little bit of statistics background, my grandfather said, hey, you'd be great in quality. There's something going on with this guy Deming. Not sure what it is, some with control charts, some kind of stuff like that. Could you go figure it out? So I've been into the data collection, data evaluation way back in the early 80s, started getting into vision systems with OGP, another great Rochester company. Then got into coordinate measuring machine stuff, bought some Zeiss Prisma scanning probe head machines, always kind of pushing the envelope as to what you could do with data acquisition and moving productivity in the shop floor along. Started doing that stuff early when I had my own shop. You know, now we're talking into the 90s, bought my first Stratasys machine in the mid to late 90s. So of course, everyone's talking a lot about additive right now. Turns out, you know, a lot of us have been doing additive for a really long time. We'll talk about that. Got into simulation software, bought this purplish box from some people at Sun Microsystems back also in the 90s to start doing simulations. Tried to figure out, could we do full system simulations? Just a note to the wise, when you're running a little $15, $20 million shop, which is what it was when I did some of those things, I got a little bit ahead of myself. I have to tell you the truth. So some things are kind of cool to be a pioneer on. Some things you might want to wait for a little bit more of the road to be paved. And as we're going to talk about later today, there's a lot of stuff that's already paved. So you can see a lot of this stuff got into stuff with fiber optics, linear drives, you know, played a lot with getting into putting cameras out on the shop floor back in the early days so customers could watch the entire process of their automation systems being built 24/7. You know, so we tried to do things before they were kind of the neat, cool thing to go do because we thought it was going to make a productivity difference for the people we work with. And so, hey, that's why I love the technology part of this. And we're going to talk about what that means overall in the industry. But usually you want to kind of know, how do things look? So I'm going to answer some of Dan's initial 64,000 other questions a little bit at the beginning. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some things that I think are the neater things in technology. There's so many things happening in technology. I could talk to you for hours just about that. I'll pick 2, 3 things out that I think are particularly neat and interesting that could be valuable for you. And then just we'll tail off at the end with some things, trends, neat things that you want to keep your eye on that could have an impact in the future. Dan also mentioned this last night at dinner, kind of, hey, when you're walking around, when you're at our Discover Days, you know, just pick up those 1 or 2 cool ideas that can make a difference for your business, right? That's great advice. I'm going to say the same thing here. I'm going to ramble on about a bunch of stuff just because I'm fascinated by them. And you kind of go, man, when's this guy going to shut up? Listen, just grab, there's going to be 1 or 2 morsels that are going to be important to each one of you in some different way. Grab one of the 2 pieces and you kind of say, check the box. Hey, Dan, I did what you told me to do. Hopefully I got some of those for you. If not, ask for your money back. I was free, by the way. All right, markets, let's start there. Listen, there can't be a better time to be in this industry. If you're in manufacturing, and we're all in manufacturing, this is as good as it's going to get. This is really phenomenal. So no matter what index you want to take a look at, you can look at GDP. GDP is going to be great for the year. It's going to be really pushing closer to 6, 5 and some change. That's great. If you look at major business indexes, so Gardner's got a great business index. It's a great relative tool to use. Also, if you look at the Purchasing Managers Index, another great tool. Anytime you're over 50, you're doing well. Okay, so you're pushing 60s, that's great. USMTO, if you take a look at what we do, putting out a USMTO data, right now it's really kind of pushing to the roof, and I'm going to show you some specific data on that as we go on. But one of the really interesting sectors to take a look at, which is one of the biggest changers, what's happening with the mold and die business. We lost most of that mold and die business back in the 90s, okay? And it really went offshore. It's growing now at an unbelievable pace, nearly 300% last year, change in the mold and die sector just by itself, and another 150% this year. Okay, so it's relatively been small because of what we've lost in the United States, but those are huge moves in those areas. So a lot of stuff you can actually pull out and discover from the USMTO data information. I'll talk a little bit more about that. The Oxford economic guys are people that we use taking a look at global forecasts and things that are happening around the world, but also digging into specific sectors here in the United States. We'll also show you some more information on this, contract machining, the sector that most of us in, if you're in the tool and die and production and contract machining, that sector, again, is really just on fire. Take a look at some of that data. And, Dan mentioned at the beginning, we do some stuff with reshoring, onshoring, and foreign direct investment. It's kind of, again, off the charts. So any of you that are new to the industry, the good news is you got a few more years of this. If you've been in the industry for a while, this is almost as good as it gets. The bad thing for the young people where this is kind of new, it's going to be hard to keep on doing this for the next couple of decades. So make hay while you can make hay. Dig into the details a little bit. Machine shops, if you're taking a look at that as a NAICS code detail, that's a trend line going in the right direction. So it's going to be pushing over 100 billion in shipments. And so those are some pretty big numbers when it comes to this sector. That's a real positive for us and what we do in the industry. This one, not meant to have you actually read a ton of detail, but what I want to have you do, am I pointing to this? No, I'm not. Pretend I'm pointing to you. All this stuff in this quadrant is really kind of what's new and interesting. So if you take a look at the y-axis, you're taking a look at what's going on overall from the standpoint of shipments, so overall size. Percentage change on the other axis. What's different now than in previous years is that all these little sectors over here in the left corner, okay, so the percentages are high, the dollar volume is small. Depends how much work you do as a contract shop. I used to laugh at this, eventually got as big as 50 million with my shop. But people are saying, well, some of these industries are small. That's 50 billion on that sector there. I'm not sure how much work you bring into your shop, but if I could just get a small percentage of $1 billion market, I was kind of happy with that. So these guys are all in the 100 billion sector. What's different is aerospace and automotive used to always make up a huge percentage of our market space. And for the first time in 40 years, automotive and aerospace is only 20% of what the actual markets that we're tracking overall from the USMTO standpoint. And so all of these new markets, especially what's happening with small arms, mold, we talked about that, recreation, a lot of the ones you might not normally be paying attention to are the sectors where there's huge growth opportunities. And so you got to change a little bit of how you're going to market and where you're finding your customers. But the reality is there's huge opportunities. Automotive and parts, they're still going to be out there. They're the really big guys at the end of the day. But opportunities are really happening over here in this sector. And that's something really new and different, which is really great. Having a diversified base to go get your products and customers from helps you balance when things start going off the rails. And I know that because I did a ton of stuff in automotive over the years and I went off the rails. So it's one to watch out for. We talked about this from the Purchasing Management Index. It was on that first page. Just mostly want you to take a look at the trend and where that trend is. Again, getting above the 50 line is good. You can see where we're currently at in those numbers. Capacity utilization. This gets to be interesting from the standpoint of, used to be in the old days, again, if you're starting to approach 80% from a capacity utilization with facilities, you kind of know you're at a nearly full capacity standpoint. And that's where a lot of purchasing takes place, but also you can take a look at how folks are actually doing, driving what's happening in the economy, how busy folks are. And what you're starting to see really, and this is an average, so even when you're in the mid to upper 70s, you're really getting into a good spot because it's an average. So I mean, some shops are in the 80s to maybe 90s. And you can have some that are below that. Some of what's below that right now is automotive because you can't get enough of the components you need. That's what's pulling it down a little bit. But capacity utilization, really in a good spot as well. Job shops, shipment and orders. This one's kind of interesting from the standpoint of, if you take a look what's always happened, so the light blue is shipments, the dark blue are new orders. And you can see for quite a long time, they matched, which typically for a lot of stuff when we're making in the shops, you make it, you turn it, right? What's interesting, if you take a look, and it'll be part of the ongoing discussions here this morning, we're starting to have that separation. And the separation really started happening when you look at the dates, kind of in our COVID period and as you rolled into this year. So the reality is we're actually getting the orders, and the orders are actually moving in the right direction. But you can see we're starting to have a gap with shipments, and you can figure out why between connecting those two dots. That's a problem that we all need to work on, and it's starting to show up actually in the data. That's a crazy one, but basically here, all we're trying to do is take a look again back to USMTO. So what's happening with, manufacturing technology orders, total order values we're tracking, and then we have a 12-month and 3-month average. You can see where they're moving. Again, just we're moving in the right direction. You take a look at those trend lines. Actually, the light blue helps you in a 12-month. You're trying to take a look at what that extended movement is with USMTO. These orders are going to keep on coming, and we'll see it in another slide or two. The predictions are going to be that it keeps going in that direction. Here, these are forecasts. So the forecast, you look at USMTO, again, going out, it's really moving towards that 6 billion up at that high point, and almost 6 billion again after that, after it tails off a little bit. USMTO, we only keep track of about 65 to 70% of the market. So those are people who participate and give us data. So the total market for what we're talking about here in manufacturing technology in the United States is about 10 billion. Okay. So when you see, geez, we're just getting to 6 billion, it's actually, those are of the people participating in USMTO. We are going to be hitting some of the best numbers that we've ever recorded since we've been doing USMTO for nearly 50 years. Okay, so some of the best numbers ever recorded. And you can see that if you take a look here, if you take a look at 2021, just go down to total, that's 42% up for machine tools. So the overall cutting and forming put together. If you look at the prediction now for 2022, we're saying up another 11%. So we're going to be going for one of the best years ever recorded this year. We're talking about being up another 11, almost 12% next year. And then you can go, uh-oh, we're going to go down 2% in 2023. It doesn't matter. You're talking about some of the best years ever recorded, down 2 to 3%. It's irrelevant. You're still at some of the highest points ever. There's a nice runway here of opportunity. And you can see it across different sectors. I would point out an interesting thing that we're studying a little bit more is that huge number forming. Forming was always kind of maybe 30% or 40% of the overall number at the most. You're going to see over the next 5, 6 years, forming getting to be a much larger segment. It's not that the metal cutting is going away. The amount of forming is going to increase. There's going to be some change in metal cutting for lots of different reasons that we'll talk about. But the forming is actually going up. If you think about automotive for a minute, we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the presentation. Obviously, what's happening with electronic vehicles is having an impact. What doesn't change is the fact that you need to be forming a lot. So you can change the look, the style, and the feel of fabricating. IEDA's got like 2 years of backlog at this point. Metal forming is on fire, and it will be for a long period of time. It's going to be an interesting sector to watch because of some of the dynamic changes in the industry. Okay, enough of that. So economists help us with all that kind of stuff. I can answer more questions later if I don't know the answer. I'll just refer you to our Chief Knowledge Officer, Pat McGimmon. He's always got a good answer for that. Let's talk technology stuff. Why is technology stuff so important, so fun, so interesting right now? It's because we got all these neat enabling technologies. Kind of like, what's the why now that all of a sudden it's talking smart, digital, blah, blah, blah. It's just because you got all these things are readily available. And all those things that are readily available make it possible to do all these super cool technologies that you can start having fun with. So without that first page, you don't get to do all the stuff on the next page. And so when you look at the things, whether it's generative design, additive manufacturing, digital twin, what's happening in augmented reality, virtual reality, all of these technologies are leveraging the fact that you've got low cost, simple ways to go do this. And this is what's creating the juggernaut to get into the space that we're in. And so I'm not going to take you through all of those. I'm going to talk about 2, 3 of them that I think are cool. But I'll talk about some of the stuff kind of in background that are connected to it. That maybe helps put a different level of relevance to what's important in this and where you can see the technology driving to an end solution. So when you look at that, this is one of the things that's a fundamental. It's a fundamental of what's really going on in the world. And you can start to see how all the technologies, all the businesses, all the startups, the SPAC money and other things we're going to talk about, all dial back to a few central things. And so manufacturing Utopia is really like the Star Trek replicator. You want what you want, when you want it, where you want it, the way you want it. Ideally, if you needed, whether it happened to be a car or a component to fix your refrigerator, and you could just have it made at that moment in your house, that's ideal, right? You get exactly what you want. And so we work down that kind of trend, like how do we make that utopia real? And if you look at things like additive has started to do that to some extent. All right, you can have the Mickey Mouse version of having kind of a maker bot and kind of do some goofy piece of jewelry and you kind of say, hey, I just fixed part of my doorknob at home. Yeah, good for you. Really, that's really not interesting, but I love that you're playing in manufacturing. But these technologies are getting much more productive, much more industrial, and they're going to be closer and closer and closer to that. People are always on that quest to get to that utopia. So just keep that thought in mind as you look at what starts to happen with investments and actually always see the dynamics that's then creating out in the industrial space, because this is where the business opportunities are for you, and or your competition is going to be going there, and or this is where someone's going to actually take your cheese away. So it's what you want to pay attention to. So what's happening as you chase that utopia? Well, you get mass customization being the norm. It's not that we're making the same thing over and over again. You know, a lot of the new BMW plants and other facilities are really actually taking a look at what you can do by having every car that comes down the line be different based on what your need is. And make it so I don't have car lots all over the place filled with tons of inventory, but make what you want delivered to you when you want it. It's happening, same thing with the Tesla model. A lot of other models are all moving to this. So the driving huge amount of investment in mass customization is a big deal. Smart factories become critical then. You can't do the first one, mass customization, without having a much more digitally connected facility. It's impossible to do that. So it's driving the investment, the ongoing investment in automation and smart technology inside a facility to accommodate the first thing. And in order to do that, you need lots of bright people getting into the game and having a lot more information to share. How do you do that? You're basically getting this, what we're talking about, the democratization of what's happening in manufacturing. So what do I mean by that? Well, whether it could be going to GitHub and downloading free things that you can use, whether it's using augmented reality and other tools like that to be able to do learning, whether it's using LinkedIn Learning or using YouTube, being able to actually go get the information when you need it, where you need it to do what you need. You couldn't do those things before. That's allowing us to take a broader spectrum of people and introduce them into our space quickly and leverage the ability to actually drive towards this manufacturing utopia. So again, you can see these little building blocks as you go. Another key building block is kind of this idea of what happens going from, physical things. So going from atoms to bits to atoms. And there's a big thing out in Silicon Valley when you're kind of talking about what do they want to innovate. They were mostly focused on the middle category. They were just all bit heads, kind of doing things in software. They quickly realized, I got to make something at the end of the day. And so there's this big move to make things. The reality is it's this constant loop between these. So whether you're talking about a product or a process, you start out with a physical product or process, and then you want to digitize measuring. You want to kind of say, okay, I want to somehow make it better. So in the case of, my background, using a coordinate measuring machine or using vision systems, I'm going to get the part and now it's going to go from a physical, I'm going to make it digital. Why do I want to do that? Well, maybe I want to get it into a modeling system. Maybe I want to leverage generative design or something else so that I can actually make the part better and more unique. It's true for a process too. You want to watch flow through your shop. Okay, how do I scale it up? You got your physical shop. Now you want to start to create digital. So you do a CAD layout or something else. Start thinking about how that keeps on advancing. So you actually have all the digital components of the process. So you go from the physical process in your factory and you make it digital. Why? You want to figure out how to optimize it. You want to figure out what change you could make to it to make it better. So you do all those things in a digital world. And then what do you do with it? At some point, you want to actually make the new product better or make the process new better. You go back to physical again. And it's this constant loop that ends up happening, which is interesting. Again, physical to digital to physical. All these pieces, again, the utopia, kind of these tools, these technologies, they're all interwoven actually. And you kind of, again, to start thinking them through and breaking them down to their simple components, you kind of see how they all work together. And so there are just fundamental building blocks that make all this work. And it's same across the board. And so all of these start with what we can do today, having tons of sensors and devices that are easily interconnected. There's cheap, they're ubiquitous. There's trillions and trillions of sensors out there. There's ways that we're collecting and using data different than ever before. That data we're actually able to do something with now thanks to the cloud. So you can store it someplace, because back in the old days, you could get about an hour's worth of stuff, and then what are you going to do? You can't keep storing it. Now you can store like tons of information, but then you have to do something with it. And that's where you start applying the analytics to it. So you're adding intelligence to it that, again, you can leverage the cloud to do because you use processing power of AWS or other things online to do processing you could never have done back in your own facility. And now it's simple, free, and easy to do. And then you can start to then leverage the next step of that, which is then building machine learning systems off of the analytics that you've created that actually drive a proactive way of actually doing something with the data. This is the progression, and the progression is really not that complicated. There's devices all over. Look at all the equipment that you see out there on the shop floor. The amount of information and technologies available built into like these Mazak machines is unbelievable compared to 10 or 20 years ago. And it's going to keep on getting better and better and better. You got to do something with that data. You're going to drive kind of uniqueness with the analytics. And analytics is really nothing more than statistics. So I remember I mentioned I got a statistics degree. You're just talking about, correlations, so you're looking at kind of just the fundamentals of the data, back to simple regression analysis and other things. The difficulty is when you go to AI and machine learning, you have to start developing some algorithms to do it. Algorithms are nothing more than a slightly next stepped up version of statistics, adding a little software to it to actually drive the ability to interpret future actions. These simple steps, those are the building blocks. The data that you get out of that gets broken into a couple simple categories. So in the beginning, you just got really simple stuff. You collected some data and you got descriptive. You figure out, okay, descriptive data, I know what happened. But when you start moving up that food chain by going through those processes that we talked about, you start to get to go, how about predictive data? So you can now start, as you improve your analysis, as you improve your analytics, you can now be predictive. And that's not even that interesting anymore. You want to get into actually diagnostic. So you want to know actually what happened. Why did it happen? Not just predicting what's going to happen. And then the next step after that really is prescriptive. What might happen? What might happen? What might I do about it? And again, not to over talk about this stuff, these steps all are kind of the things that are being built into what's happening today. So progressive companies like Mazak, people in this manufacturing technology space, they get this, they understand this, and this is what's being built into the systems. And also why they want to stay connected to the machines. When you guys have the equipment on your floor, being able to be connected to the people that actually make the equipment in some way to share the data is what's able to drive this. And it's from lots of data that you can drive the real solutions. And so there's a real opportunity to be connected with a good partner and be able to leverage that data both for your internal purposes, but also to leverage the bigger pool of data. So you imagine all the Mazak machines there are around the world, and to be able to collect that data and use that data to help you refine what you're doing your processes. That's when this ball all starts coming together, right? So we get the idea. Data is really important. You got that. I'm going to talk about it a lot more. This data is also really only useful if it is in some way commonized. And so keep on doing commercials for MT Connect. It's on every piece of equipment that's out there. Unless you've got standards that make it so that you actually have commonization of the data, it's very difficult to do anything with it. If I'm collecting information on temperature or vibration or anything else, and all the data is coming in differently, when you try to do something with that data, you don't know whether or not it's actually the same information that you're doing. So having some way of having structured, commonized data is very important if you want to actually play. So let's talk about some of those technologies that I thought were fun and interesting. And we've got to start there, right? One of the things I would say, even though that's a big potential market, 640 billion, and there's a bunch of people that run around talking about these numbers. Hey, if they're off by half, whatever. That's Terry Woller's number. Terry's a little bit great. Oh, no, I should not say that because it's going to be recorded. Terry's a great guy. Even if he's off by half on his numbers, hey, look, it's still a big number, right? And so one of the things that I talk about with additives, I think is an important thing to remember. Additive is important. I'm going to talk about some of where you shouldn't get too overly concerned. You're going, uh-oh, I don't do any additive. What's going to happen to me? Additive is interesting from the standpoint, it created an entire generation of people that got interested in manufacturing. I think it's the biggest thing that additive has done for us. The entire maker movement, those little cheesy MakerBot things I shouldn't have said that either, right? Sorry, MakerBot. Okay, so listen, those inexpensive additive machines that you can buy for $1,500. They allowed the average, Jill or Jane or Joe get into the space and try it out. And those people in that maker movement, 500,000 people strong, that was, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. All those people got interested. How do you create an STL file? How do you go to GitHub and download basic free software? Use my iPhone, put something over here, load in some nylon, and actually make a part with an additive machine, that's one of the biggest contributions additive has made. They're important otherwise too. I mean, there's a lot of new technologies in the additive space. And so, this is what I call the Heinz 57. Going back to Terry Weller's, look at the Weller's report. There's 57 different types of additive manufacturing technology. Okay, 57. There's somebody in the back row counting saying, hey, there's not 57 things up there. There's only 35. So you're right. I got tired of typing these stupid things in, and so I stopped at 35. So there's 35 up there. There's 22 more I didn't tell you about. Look, the point is there's a lot going on with additive, and it's going to keep on growing. It is relevant. They are solving structural problems. They're solving application problems. They're figuring out speed problems. They're figuring out precision problems. This is great news. There's a lot happening in that space, and it's something to pay attention to for certain applications. It's going to be important. And I'd even start talking about hybrid, of which, again, go out there, and there's super cool things that people like Mazak are doing in the space. This is going to be important, but there's going to have to be some consolidation. Things are going to be changing. You got to make sure you connect with the right people in the right space. One of the ways I know for sure it's going to be changing is what's happening with the crazy investment world here. So, SPACs, special application acquisition corporations, are doing enormous roll-ups and investments in this area. So I want to take a look at kind of in the middle. So Desktop Metal, 2.5 billion is kind of what their projected SPAC value. You looked at Mark Forge, look at Bell 3D, one of the newer ones. The interesting one is to go look at the expected fundraising money. That's the cash that they're going to have on hand when they get done doing their SPAC deal. Okay, if you haven't heard of Redwire or Rocket Lab, they're really cool aerospace, space-based companies that are doing things with technology like additive, really moving the space theme forward. The point is, in that expected funding category, what would you do with your company if you're doing like $20-30 million in sales, which some of the people that are getting these kinds of SPACs, and you got several $100 million new cash that came into your business? You create some really cool, I shouldn't say it because they're recording, really cool stuff, right? I was going to say something else, but it's really cool what you can do with that kind of money. But what's happening is this industry is able to do R&D like no other. I mean, that's massive amount of money, and they're using that money to figure out whether it's the next 57 in the Heinz 57, or take 1 or 2 or 3 of the Heinz 57 and turn it into a practical, real, high-speed, high-precision application of that technology. So you got to pay attention to it. But you don't want to freak out at the end of the day going, uh-oh, chip cutting's gone. Damn, don't worry. Yeah. We're good here. We're good on chip cutting for a while. I mean, global economy is 80 trillion. So let's just break it down for a second to make you feel good about this. Global manufacturing, that's 13 trillion of that 80. Additive manufacturing is 13 billion. Okay, 13 billion. So that is that 0.1%. Okay, it's not that big. And if Terry's right, love you, Terry, in case you're watching. Okay, look, let's say Terry's right, and it's 640, billion is what it turns into. That 0.1% just tricks up to 5%. All right. Do we need to pay attention? Is it relative? Is it useful as a tool? Absolutely. Okay. But is it going to turn the world upside down in the space that you're in? Probably not right away. These are the people that are playing in that space, always like putting their names out there. Just some of the people are doing cool or neater, fun stuff. I try to do with each of the slides when we get to some of the technologies. Desktop Metal and X1 are actually in negotiations right now to become one company. And so you're going to see a lot of consolidation happening here. Some different players materialize, really cool companies started in Belgium a long time ago, really full service. These are neat companies doing things in the space. These slides, I think, are all available for you guys to have afterwards. You want to go see who are the what's-its that are interesting to watch. These are some really fun companies to watch. Next, cognitive automation. Just automation and cool in general right now is super cool. Not just that I'm an automation guy at the end of the day, but a lot of things happening in automation that are mission critical for us because we're having a difficult time getting people into the industry, but it's not just that. We have to make productivity leaps that are difficult to do without some of these newer levels of technology. So when we talk about cognitive automation, really, again, it's just that next step happening with automation. And we'll kind of show in a few of the slides as we go on, but it's the concept of getting to the point that you're able to use reason, learning, getting vision, natural language processing integrated into the system that's then able to make some forward-thinking decisions about what to do in the automation on the floor at the time it's actually in production. That's new and different, and it's really interesting to take a look at. And so, when we started out doing basic things in the industry, when you're doing the simple stuff I would do at the beginning, whether it's pick and place or shuttle transfer, things like that, the way you did the PLC or the logic on it was as simple as it was an action to a reaction. You programmed it, a certain thing was going to happen, and those were the only choices you could have. And you start moving down kind of the frame, using data more interesting, being able to have actually systems take different types of unstructured data together with structured data. You can start doing ways to have the automation adapt, take things that are happening with the vision system, take the probes that are on the machine, start to actually discern steps that they could do on their own. When you get to cognitive, now you start getting into advanced applications, leveraging machine learning, leveraging AI, and you will get to the point where those automation systems will then, based on different things that come into it, automatically make changes and adjustments like what you would do if you were at the machine. Okay, and we're not that far from these things happening. So these aren't the things that are like, oh, hey, 10 years from now, this will be cool. These things are actually being put into application today. Which I point them out, they're fun stuff for you to keep track of. Who are the people playing in that space? Bright Machines, really neat company, member of AMT. They've got Brightware, one of their full service platforms and software, but they also got this really cool concept for creating micro factories. Do you want to check them out and see what they're doing there? Can you make something that's a miniature element of a manufacturing system and actually deliver it to people as a mini factory they can go do replicating and building out an entire manufacturing solution and actually move that in multiple different locations around the country, around the world. Sarah, also a very interesting company, does things with developing AI platforms, vision, other systems relative to robotics. Largely, most of the major robotics companies works with Ocera's platform. You know the guys in the middle. My buddy Mike was here earlier talking. Fanuc's doing unbelievable things in lots of places. Preferred Networks is actually a company that Fanuc has done some investment into. They specifically are looking at how to leverage AI and machine learning in the robotics and machine tool sectors only. So since those are really neat sectors to me, the fact there's a company that's just out there doing super high-end stuff in that space, Preferred Networks, that's those up there because they actually play in some interesting areas in automation and biomimicry. And so they're one of the leaders in the world for actually creating automation from biomimicry. So looking at things in nature and then actually taking what they learn in nature, whether it's kind of how the spine of a humpback whale works and how you might build that into a piece of automation, or how a hummingbird actually can hover and move and what happens with the structure and the weight to movement ratios. And they create automation based on that. Really genius, cool stuff. All right, that's enough of those guys. Whenever I do an automation slide, I always get the people that go, but yeah, you're going to take all the jobs away. And I'm like, what rock have you been hiding under? I mean, we can't get enough people to get in this industry. What people I need people. I mean, come on, I can't get enough of them. We've been saying this since, well, you get the idea, right? 20s, 30s. I could have kept on going with the slide. Every decade, there's someone that's got this ingenious quote that they're going to talk about how automation is going to ruin the world and there's going to be no jobs for anybody. Come on. Ever since we've been developing automation, it's for the greater good. We're trying to drive productivity. You're trying to increase output. You're trying to leverage the fact that you don't have enough people you can get in to do the things you need to do. And then what happens is people move up the chain. You become an application engineer. You become a programmer. You develop new technologies. There's always jobs that get to be different jobs. It's been true for 100 years. It'll be true for 100 more. Don't let someone give you some story about why, if you're in automation, you're killing jobs. It's the exact opposite, of course. All right, one more fun one. Digital twin. Digital twin is one of those things that you kind of go, yeah, kind of interesting, but it's really going to do something that's going to make a big difference for me. Digital twin could be out of all those ones I just did, although automation is going to be pretty big, tough to avoid that one. Digital twin really is a game changer, and it's not that far away from being super practical. You can see based on growth rate, that's a compounded annual growth rate for it. That's moving at a pretty quick pace, and those are pretty good numbers, which means there's investment in it. And when there's investment in growth, it's going to be more and more pervasive in the marketplace. So it's not a really low tracking thing. This is a high tracking thing. So you talk digital twin, like what are the key components? What do you got to have to make it happen? And so the reality is you siphon out of both these two categories to be able to drive building digital twin technology. So you need all these cool things that are happening. from an IoT, so industrial Internet of Things. You got to be able to grab the storage, the analytics, the application development, but you got to link that together with what's going overall kind of in the system. So your CAD, smart systems, PLM, so kind of the systems, the ERP, the MES systems that are being put out in larger facilities, and also the basics of digital simulation. Digital twin is not digital simulation. Digital twin, when you integrate all of these components, is leveraging all of the information to actually create a true kinematic functioning model of the real thing. And so if you've got that, what can you do? Well, the reality is you can do all these things. So you can actually get to having the prototype now digital. And this is a big deal. Again, having come out of a tool shop and made a lot of prototypes for a lot of people, if your main business is making prototypes for people, you better pay attention to this, because you definitely can make many of the types of prototypes I used to build in my shop and do it now in a digital twin manner that takes a lot of the actual physical prototyping out and moves you right to final product. And that's true then when you're looking at testing out for ergonomics, initial product design, but even now when you talk about production flow, you're setting up your factory and doing those things. You can get the complete factory setup of the physical things moving from location to location. And again, it's when you put in all of the information to actually drive off of real data, things that have really happened in the space. Remote setup is one. We've got an AIM committee at AMT. So it's the guys that are involved in custom automated systems, and so it's the guys that are doing kind of leading edge automation. So it's automation in manufacturing. And we had the folks in from Siemens that have to have one of the more advanced digital twin systems. And one of the guys had just got done building a large multi-million-dollar system and had been using their digital twin platform to replicate the system. Why they got to be important, and I built large systems for a number of different years. When you ship a system, normally what the last thing is, it's all the controls guys all over the machine trying to do debug, trying to get the logic set up, trying to get that last little bit of debug done. And also you want to get that machine torn down and shipped. And so the problem is the last few bits of the control stuff are keeping all of that hardware on the floor while the customer is dying to get it. Well, now what you're able to do is actually just get it pretty close, get the hardware set, and actually ship that equipment before you got all the control system done. And do your final debug in the digital twin, because the actual pellet movement, the actual force of the spindle, the actual clamping systems, all of those components, every single component, the real physical parts of the variables that those things are made of, are built into the digital twin. And when you can do that, you can replicate finishing all the logic before then getting it physically on the machine, which you can do now. It's being set up at the customer's floor. And we saw the real application of that. This is now over a year ago that was happening with the Siemens system. This stuff isn't someday future thing. This is definitely what's happening now in that space. And when you got big boys like this that are actually putting that technology out, the investment is going to continue, and it's going to get better and better as time goes on. And these guys are all doing huge investments in those areas. Now, I'd make a commercial note on the Hexagon. Hexagon was the metrology guys when I was back as a quality engineer in my early days. No kind of subtleness in the name change. So it used to be Hexagon Metrology, right? Incorporated. They changed the name. That's very much on purpose, because Hexagon they were all about the guys that went from physical, digital, physical. And now if you look at the acquisitions and growth that they've done, if you want to figure out where the industry is going, what's happening in the world, go dial back your time machine, look online, look at what Hexagon was doing back 10, 15 years ago, and look at the acquisitions, the companies that are in their portfolio today. And then you can stitch together these things that I'm talking about and see where the space is going. Lots of these guys playing in a similar space. Okay, quick trends. Yeah, I gotta shut up. All right, so I'll go really fast. All right, this is the big stuff. All right, just kidding. Look at a lot of this stuff is kind of always connected to some other thing that's easy to track down. So what's really going on in this manufacturing utopia, supply chain issues? If you look at where investments are going, everyone's trying to solve the final mile problem. Again, back in utopia, what you want, where you want. And so the biggest problem is I can make this stuff, but how do I finally get it to the end customer? Electronic vehicle, liftoff and landing vehicles, autonomous, especially when it comes to actually trucking. 18-wheelers and stuff are going to be a really big growth area. Warehousing automation, automatic mobile robotics, biggest sector growing in automation robotics, going off the charts, huge. And part of it is warehouses going everywhere. So this idea of localization, people, you can't buy a warehouse now. I mean, everybody wants to be somewhere localized. The same thing is going to be true in contract manufacturing that you need to be watching out for. Things are moving to more localized area. This also applies, obviously, to supply chain stuff we just got done talking about. The whole supply chain issue, we've screwed that up for years. Good news is, hey, look, a lot of it's coming back. Most companies want to bring it back. That's reshoring. Reshoring is only one piece. That's someone that, in my opinion, move something possibly for the wrong reason. I'm okay. I'm all about global. Make stuff where you need to go use it. That's great. But if you made it in some cheap place just so you could bring it back, that's ridiculous. And there's a way to change that. And a lot of people see that. The bigger things that are happening is in foreign direct investment or onshoring. People are just coming here for the first time saying, I want to be in this market. I want to make it in this market because I want to be close to the consumer. The good news for us is US is going to be the biggest consumer market for quite some period of time. I get the Chinese are out there doing stuff. We're going to be that big consumer market. We always have been. People want to make it where people consume it. That's going to be great for us. What you have to watch is the bad news side of the category. There's 195 countries around the world, right? If we keep on chasing the lowest cost country, we're going to be in trouble. That's never going to work. Eventually, we'll end up in Zimbabwe if you go alphabetically. It's just not the thing you want to be doing at the end of the day. Why? We should have learned our lessons. This is the process, right? So really, if the tsunami didn't make us figure it out, COVID certainly has. You're screwed if you don't figure out how to have some domestic capability in different categories. You can't be a service-based industry. You know, get to the middle point there. Look, for security or just from the economy. I was talking about this bridging. I mean, every dollar spent in our space and manufacturing technology generates another 279 of further money in the economy. That's not true if you're just running a barbershop, right? Services are great, we need it, but if you think you're going to run a country based on that, you're absolutely not going to happen. And that's driving new models of manufacturing. We'll talk about that. What's a little bit happening in the automation space. People are buying automation now for good reasons. Thing to watch, again, major category in this spot, what's happening where manufacturing as a service, manufacturing on demand, or now a new thing, which I won't talk about, some other companies coming up with equipment as a service. Look, the important thing here is the model is changing. If you're in contract manufacturing and you're not watching these companies really closely, you're nuts. You better watch it. The world that I grew up in and I lived in from contract manufacturing is changing radically. These major players, if you look at what Protolabs has done, or Xometry, or Fictive, or Fast Radius, Shapeways is just doing it in additive. The other guys are doing it across different board. They're actually becoming the Amazon of our space, right? And so the reality is these guys are rolling up manufacturers. Xometry, Fictive, Fast Radius, it only works when they get other contract shops to be part of their network. And now that's a network that they're driving the connection to the customer. And they're creating the technology that integrates the customer's need, the product through to manufacturing and shipping it back out the door. And so these guys are either going to be the vast majority of where the manufacturing takes place, or you're going to be looking at just boutique shops outside that space. When you think that's just a crazy idea, there's some guy that had a bookstore back somewhere, you know, a few decades back, and kind of had this idea to do something different. And that's Amazon. And what's happened with Amazon is going to happen in our space of manufacturing. These people are showing how it can be done. Just you want to pay attention to it. Quickly, when it comes to combustion vehicles, electronic vehicles, the good news is, and I'm an Audi fan, on the right-hand side of the screen, there's tons of stuff that's going to still be machined, right? But it's nowhere near what it used to be. And so you got to start looking at these numbers. 5% of all the vehicles today are electronic vehicles. It's going to be 11% by 2025. It's going to be 24% by 2030. That means the gas, which is currently at about 90%, combustion engine is going to be 39% by 2030. And hybrid, that's going to be jumping up. That's changing. That all the stuff that was being machined, those people who are machining are going to go someplace else. So you got to know where you're going to go and how you're going to play it. This isn't going away. This is off of all these guys' websites. If there's no number behind it, that means it's 100% of their platforms will be electronic or hybrid. GM by 2035, VW half, BMW all by 2030, Toyota 90% one or the other. You get the idea. So if you were making transmission lines, connecting rods, blocks, engines, you know, look, I think even if the numbers are off by half and they did this just to be socially aware and be part of a woke generation saying, hey, we're better than we really are, again, if you're off by half and you're in manufacturing, you got to pay attention to all that machine's got to change and go someplace else. So you don't want to lose track of it. These are the cool things I don't have any more time to talk about, but they're really cool. Take my word for it. Last thing, okay, what do you do about it? Hey, you jabbered on now for 40 plus minutes. What are you gonna do? Look, it's kind of, I'll break it down, make it as simple as I can for you. Every one of you really is the smartest person in the room. It's because you know something, you can do something, your experience is unique, different, whether you're running a machine, you're running a business, doesn't matter. You're the smartest person at that point for the things you know in your head that you can go do. Go leverage that. You got to get out of your comfort zone with these things. All this stuff I just got done talking about gets us out of our comfort zone. I get it. I've been doing it now for 40 years. The trick is partner with someone that can help you out. Go pick a really cool technology company. Don't go down this road on your own. Go pick somebody cool you want to be partnered up with. Start small. Don't boil the ocean. Don't fix everything in your shop at one time. Pick one problem, one place. Pick one person to be your leader to go do that. Let them go do that, and then allow them to fail. If you don't allow them to fail, you're going to be walking too much on the cozy line. You're not going to get these kinds of changes done. Guys, these are changes we got to deal with. This stuff that's happening is happening, but it's a great time to be a manufacturer. I already pointed that out. You want to go leverage it. So at the end of the day, leveraging they didn't trademark it, so I'm going to go use it. Hey, time's your enemy. You got to do stuff really fast. You got a good opportunity to go out there and just discover what's new and what's different, how to innovate. These kind of people you want to partner with. That's it. I went over time, so that's it. Go to questions.
All right, thanks, Doug. I mean, that was amazing. Wow, you talk fast. That was great. Just one note before we get to Q&A. The presentation and the slides would be available tomorrow, Bridget, and they can find them on our website on demand in the app. Yeah. In the Discover app and online. Yeah. So for those, if you have other associates and so forth back at your operations, this was recorded and the slides are available. So with that, we got a few minutes to open it up for any questions. And I was going to start it off because I do have one question. Speaking on behalf of the many job shops that are visiting Discover this week. And they'll range anywhere from maybe 2 machines in their contract shop up to 15 or 20 or what have you. And in many cases, what we see is that they're attaining, 50, 60% utilization and really want to get that up, want to push that up to maybe 80%. How do you get started? This whole, the digital is intimidating. It's new. It's evolving quickly. How do you recommend? What's the easiest way to get started? With small baby steps for that small job shop.
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting because so if you're selling equipment, you're going to be going, hey, do I want all these people to go from 50% up to like 85%, or I want to buy a bunch more equipment? Companies like Mazak, are progressive in that standpoint, going, look, I want people to be profitable. So I want you to get to 80%, even if you don't buy another machine for a couple of years. I want you to be as productive as possible because that long term is the best for the economy, the industry, and you. And if you're profitable, you're going to buy more business long term. So that's a great look at it. The best way to start answering that question is kind of what I was putting on the previous slide. You got to pick one thing in your shop floor. You got to pick one machine. And if you happen to have a Mazak machine, the good news is you got everything already on it with MT Connect built into it. So you can grab structured data. Whether you want to look at power or you want to look at uptime, or you get a little more advanced, you want to look at OEE. Just pick one of those things, start out simple. You don't have to buy a lot of extra expensive software. Everything is actually able to be ported out to a simple spreadsheet, and you can actually just take a look at that information on your own. So the best way to take a look at it is really going, okay, I am going to pick just one thing. And once you get good at that one thing, the amazing thing is that I found the guy or gal that you've got doing that is quickly going, hey, but I'm here and we got a sensor to do this. And hey, we got more data, we could do that. And this was easy to put in this machine, I'll put it on 3 more. So the things that I always see go wrong when I run around the country and I look at shops is that they come up with what seems to be the great idea. They decide to put in every machine in their shop. And the reality is they self-implode, you get frustrated, the people that are running the equipment feel like, hey, you're in my knickers, you're causing me problems. And it just doesn't work. So my best advice is what I've seen always work is Start simple, pick one thing you want to take a look at doing. OEE is a really good thing to take a look at. And it could be as simple as just spindle utilization, right? Break it down to the simplest element. And then from that, just keep building and building on that. And you'll find that your people on their own, they get it. They'll be able to kind of spread after that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the group out there? And no need to be shy. And it was a lot of great material. Yeah, in the back. Matt, you have the. Okay, great.
So you mentioned EV, and we see a lot of these forecasts out as to what intentions are. But if you pay attention to other industries, so the automotive transportation industry has a huge support network, huge. Whether it's manufacturers making parts, whether it's energy companies making fuel. And I have a little bit of insight into this sector, but energy is saying this is all pie in the sky. If you look at the way these batteries work, how much energy they take, and the feasibility of actually having a fleet of vehicles at a certain percentage, they can't do it. They've admitted it. And the trends that are moving away from fossil fuel energy production or transformation from one to the other, it can't happen even with the current levels of capability that we have while using fossil fuels. So I think you see what I'm getting at.
Yep.
The electric producing companies are saying, no way.
Yep.
Now, I always see these EV slides. I've never seen, if you're away from the electric or energy producing companies, I've never seen their slides in one of these presentations, and I've seen quite a lot of these of trends and what's happening. I guess two questions. One, how do we overcome that feasibility, if it's even overcomable? Two, is anyone listening to the power companies? Because like I said, I've never seen their say in one of these type of presentations. And then I guess three, how is all that realistically going to come together to help these automakers hit these numbers that they're seeing?
Gotcha. Okay. She's calling me out on my nice ED slide. I was impressed that I made that slide myself. Come on now. Jeez. All right. So listen, I told Dan I'd avoid getting into politics, which would be the best way to answer your question because it's being recorded and I'll get in trouble. So let's escape that for a second. I understand and I agree. Like I said, I couch those things by in several of these slides saying, look, say they're wrong by half. And say all those companies I put up there put that happy horse manure on their website because they're trying to take care of some particular constituency that they feel they need to make happy now. Did I do that without getting into trouble? I think I did. Okay, so look, yep, I get it. And we don't have the infrastructure. So again, trying to avoid politics, let's just say part of the current infrastructure bill was to really make infrastructure, and it was to take care of some of those problems which we're going to need to go do. It's still years off and happening, right? But then we got to get the practical reality of it. Tesla just did the largest purchase, got the largest order ever for electronic vehicles going into Hertz. Those things I showed you about those companies, again, if they're half wrong, you know what it is if you've been in the automotive industry of launching a transmission line or launching an engine or block line. You know, you're 3 to 5 years out. So if they're thinking those dates are about where they're going to go do it, how many new transmission lines and block lines and headlines do you think are going to get launched? You're right in the reality of the energy it takes to do a lot of the stuff to make these electronic vehicles work is the traditional energy industry that everyone's saying you can't have. Got it. You can't jump from one to the other. And again, when I do these things, you're right on. I'm practical there, but the side that you got to keep in mind, this wave is happening. So also I had European friends that only made block and head equipment. And the guy was insistent that all this stuff was happy horsepower. And the reality is, look, it's not. It's going to be happening. There are this element of the energy industry is going to make huge changes. Again, in that slide I had where I had lots of stuff in that upper corner, there's a ton of stuff that was energy based. It's one of the places there's tons of stuff moving. But what the everyone needs to kind of understand though is you've got to start riding this live wave at some time. A lot of this stuff is going to go away. There are going to be difficulties in infrastructure. There is going to be transition to happen. But if you just think you're going to get to 2030 and all those people were wrong by 100%, that ain't happening either. We are going to have issues digesting this, but it is affecting our industry. So again, if you're in a shop and you're working on that stuff and that's what you're selling stuff to and that's what things are happening, you can't ignore it. You're absolutely right. Is it going to switch to 100% when the clock turns to 2030 and all of a sudden magically all this stuff happens? That ain't happening either. The truth is somewhere in the middle, but the middle's enough of your market share that you got to pay attention.
Mhm.
And that's just my opinion.
Mhm.
And I didn't get paid to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that order with Hertz, what was that, 100,000 electric vehicles?
100,000 electric vehicles. Yeah, that's a lot of product. Kind of got them to be $1 trillion company by one order, and that's a good application of electronic vehicles because you typically aren't driving more than 200 to 300 miles when you get a rental.
Yeah.
And so that probably is a really smart move for them. I mean, I wouldn't get one because I drive back and forth to Rochester, where I'm from. That's for me 400 miles, and I'd have to stop for an hour lunch, and I don't normally do that. So yeah, there's tons of limitations. But again, I try to look at the trend, the flow, the kind of major dynamics in it, and looking at the energy industry is a really important thing to look at too. Got a lot of good friends there. In fact, that's one of the quick forecast things I'd point out. A lot of stuff we were talking about being really cool in 22 and 23, and these numbers being really good for all you guys for a while. That's before aerospace and automotive really comes back full cycle when you get the other side of supply chain. And that's before you really get to any of this infrastructure, which hopefully some of it's really infrastructure, before the infrastructure money can actually start to impact. So 24, 25, that's when you start getting the kicker from automotive, aerospace, and infrastructure. You guys got a good run for a while. But again, you just got to keep your eye on what's happening with some of these trends.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, the market growth this year has really been consumer driven. But as you look forward to next year and the following year, you know, you're going to see aircraft manufacturing inventories have been used up. Oil and gas, you know, consumption is going to drive, you know, some investment and of course, automotive. Any other questions from the group?
Or any other slide you really didn't like? And I worked late at night on those.
Yeah, Joe.
Hydrogen energy, I don't think on your slide. Is that anything in the focus point of?
Yeah, it's another, I mean, in similar question. I mean, a lot of people are just kind of not paying attention to hydrogen. Hydrogen's got a more difficult issue of building the infrastructure as well to get that hydrogen to the places you need to go use it. I got a friend back, I was talking with my hands, the Italians. I got a friend that lives in Pasticci in Italy that back in about 1996 actually put, modified his little Fiat to actually get it to drive off hydrogen. Okay, I mean, so this has been going on for a while. Huge opportunities in hydrogen, bigger infrastructure issues actually than putting some of the electrical systems in place. But it is kind of the forgotten piece of what's happening in alternative energy solutions. It will make a bigger comeback in a few years. I got some friends at the Department of Energy. In fact, there's going to be one of them talking here tomorrow, Dr. Kerfis. They're doing some super neat things in that place. There's also some things happening in the nuclear space that they probably don't want to talk about as much in the Department of Energy, where you start to compartmentalize the size of kind of a nuclear solution that gets to be much more compact. And so there's lots of things coming up. And so if you're in the energy field, as long as you play the field, I'm an all of the above guy. Hey, look, you can't get away from coal and oil for a while. I get the issues, make it better. There's tons of investment going into making those fuels more efficient and less impactful in the environment. No one wants to be doing things that hurts the environment. Everybody gets that. At the end of the day, we can't segue appropriately without figuring out how to best use those to transition. It doesn't change overnight, exactly to the earlier question. It doesn't change overnight. So we have to figure out how to make the best of those and weave them together. It's an all of the above.
Quick story. But yeah, Brian, go ahead.
Doug, from my previous background, I believe in these technologies. I know they're coming and so forth, okay? But, and certainly Mazak, we've tried to be at the more progressive edge of this, okay? Not necessarily at the real edge, but we tried to do more, okay? And grasp some of these technologies. But when I look at that forecast and what's really happening in the customer base here, companies maybe want to do these things, but they don't necessarily feel that they've got the people to do it. Where are they going to get the people? Where is this company going to get the people to move to all of those technologies? I think that's a piece that's missing here, because maybe everybody would like to go there, but I don't know if they can go there.
Yeah. No, I mean, the people problem's been a problem since I've been in the industry, right? And so probably as long as you've been in the industry, it's always been a problem getting people. That one slide ahead, we're talking about the democratization of what's happening. Some of the newer technologies let you train people easier. Some of the automation solutions solve some of those pieces, but we also need kind of changing, which is a bigger thing than AMT or any of us individually can do, change our entire focus from an education standpoint in what we do in the space. Association space is what you can do. I mean, SME, when I grew up, they were the people that did the training and education. And if Bob Willig is watching, great new guys or anything, I mean, SME should really just focus on education. I mean, shows are important, they're interesting, yeah, I get it. But look, it is about education. They've got tooling you, they can leverage tooling you. I recommended they do an acquisition, buy an AR company, mix an augmented reality company in, so you can actually figure out how to facilitate that training more quickly and get it to more people. That's how you start to solve this. Learning management systems, what you can do with YouTube and LinkedIn Learning. There's so many things you can do now to leverage those things. The other thing is we have to look in the mirror a little bit at us companies that make the equipment. So, I mean, the Mazaks of the world and others, when you look at the HMIs, and I get they're much better on equipment than they used to be, but you walk up to an additive machine, I mean, it's Mickey Mouse simple, right? I got a basic file, I load it in the machine, I don't do any G codes, M codes, I basically put it in, it just makes a part. I get that machine tools, especially advanced good machine tools, are different things. But the reality is, if we want more people to walk in the industry, you've got to walk up to a machine and kind of go, hey, got this part I created on this cool piece of software. I want to just be able to take this hunk of material, put it in the machine. It should figure out what tools I should use to go do that. And I push a button, it makes, I get it. You're like, great, Doc, get your head out of the clouds. But think about it for a second. I was on a Boston-matic machine in 1976. It was running off a tape. And I got some Mazak and other machines in my shop doing my apprenticeship some, 10 years later, that in the 80s. They're a lot cooler looking now, and God bless all the technology inside is dramatically different. But the HMI, when I talk about HMI, I'm really talking about take anybody off the street, have them walk up and do it like has happened in the maker movement, and then start to say, how do we connect it as an industry, whether it's making a robot work easier, a machine to work easier, even a coordinate measure sheet. Try walking up to a Zeiss scanning probe head coordinate measure and measuring the part. Good luck. We have to make the ability to walk up to a piece of technology equipment as easy as possible and leverage those other tools, LMSs, the augmented solutions, online YouTubes, and LinkedIn Learnings to have the content that we can have more average Joes and Janes use our stuff. That's something we haven't been good at doing, in my opinion.
Good.
That's just me talking. And again, I didn't pay.
Good point. We'll have that capability at Discover 2023. Yeah. Okay. We're going to have to wrap up, but just one last quick story back on the Tesla topic. Our keynote speaker on Monday experienced charging anxiety twice driving his Tesla from Detroit down to Florence, Kentucky. Had to spend the evening in Lima, Ohio so that he could charge his vehicle. Arrived on Monday with about 20% charge left. Did the presentation, brought the house down, everything was great, but then had to find a charging station here in Florence, schedule a couple of conference calls and so forth while the Tesla charged so he could start his journey back up to Detroit. So we got a little ways to go. We're working on it. Exactly. Head in the right direction. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy the-
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for hanging around.